Hello and welcome to Consumer Privacy, the Tax Professional's Responsibility. Today we're going to answer all your questions about your obligations and best practices for protecting client privacy. I'm Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I'd like to explain how CPE credit and CE works for this webinar. The webinar qualifies for 1 credit of continuing professional education. If you plan to earn CPE for attending this session, you must stay with us for at least 50 minutes. The webinar also qualifies for 1 credit of CE credit from the IRS. So if you require that, be sure to enter your PTIN number in the Ask a Question box that's at the bottom of your screen. In addition, we will display 4 polling questions during this webinar. You'll need to record an answer for at least 3 of the questions, as this is our verification that you are still watching. You'll receive an email by the end of the day today that contains a link to your CPE certificate, assuming you met the requirements for CPE. That email will be from CPA Practice Advisor, so be sure to look for that. Please note that we can give credit also for multiple people watching on the same computer. So if there are others in your office who would like to attend this event, please have them join you now. And at the end of the event, we'll provide an opportunity for you to send us their email addresses so we can issue credit to them as well. You can enter questions in the Ask a Question box on your screen, and our speaker will try to get to as many questions as possible during this presentation. Questions not answered during the broadcast will be addressed by the speaker afterwards via email. Today, we're joined by Pete Lindstrom, a cyber strategist, innovator, and economist with Drake Software. And now we're ready to begin, Pete. And Pete, you might be on mute.
Great. Thank you very much. Not quite on mute, but I lost my button. It's my first time using this system, so my apologies. It's my first time chatting with you folks today, so I'm excited to be here and looking forward to talking a little bit about my favorite topic, which is privacy, and also with the backdrop of cybersecurity, stuff that I've been working on for quite some time. And I'm really excited and interested to chat a little bit more about privacy, because it can be such an ambiguous and amorphous topic. It's like the old saying, you know it when you see it, but you can't necessarily define it. Even though we'll try to do a little bit of that today, I still leave these sessions and these types of webinars that I give always feeling like I'm wanting more. And I hope you are too, not from the perspective of, oh, I didn't provide enough insight, but from the perspective of privacy is an evolving, ever-changing kind of initiative and interest level. And we've seen that throughout the past, let's say 24 years, but really more like 50 years worth of regulation associated with the nature and types of information that we want about ourselves shared only with folks that we deem appropriate and kept protected in other areas. I start off with consumer privacy and cringe a little bit and almost duck and cover, because it's such a broad notion of handling and protecting sensitive personal information. Of course, we're gonna be diving much deeper into this, but you all might have your own definitions of what privacy means to you on a personal level. It's, one of the things about us here is not only are we responsible for the privacy of other people's information, but we react and respond to the way people manage our privacy. It's actually a good way to remind ourselves that this can be somewhat ambiguous and tricky if we're not careful about it. Certainly throughout this presentation, we'll talk about being more and more specific to the extent we can with the cautions and caveats that I already mentioned. We have some survey data from Privacy Institution, the largest institute of privacy professionals, that should not surprise you. In fact, the numbers here, the ones that surprise me most are the numbers that are actually lower. Only 68% of consumers care about their privacy. Now, the key there is worldwide. And, for a while I was on a speaking circuit for a company internationally giving talks in, the Middle East and Kazakhstan of all places, and Russia and the like. And sometimes folks don't care nearly as much about privacy in some of the countries where it seems to be a challenge for them to be private. And it's very interesting to me, coming back to the U.S., how much we care, the European Union, how much they care, but also worldwide, how the notion of privacy can change quite a bit. We know that 29% folks think it's easy to understand privacy protection. I would say I've been doing this for 30 years and it's still not easy for me. They may not understand where the devil's in the details kinds of things. There are so many different types of audits and so many ways that we have to manage online activity in this way, and physical our physical artifacts and the like, that being able to just kind of generically understand that is very tricky from my perspective. The 80% of consumers saying they're likely to stop doing business with cyber attack companies, I think they're going to be listening to crickets a lot, because the sad news, I've been doing this for 30 years, as I mentioned, and the number of cyber attacks, let's say in the 20th century, and then even the first 5 years or so into the 21st century, the numbers were fairly low. Now we're finding more and more companies are being attacked. We need a gratuitous and obvious AI reference, which is both exciting and unnerving in a sense. You folks may be experiencing that level of nervousness around the use of AI in various ways, and certainly if they're going to be if AI systems are going to be managing our information, we care a lot about that in our environment. And 33% of consumers lose trust in an organization. Trust is an area that I want to probe a little bit more on because really when I think of privacy, I think of trust. And that is, at a bigger, broader umbrella, we have to be thinking about the reason folks care about information and their sensitive and personal information typically revolves around a notion that they don't know who is out there who might want to do them wrong, or might want to really embarrass them in some way, or make fun of them, or use their information against them. When you develop trust, and an important aspect of any digital environment, you're much better off with developing the relationship associated with your, in this case, your clients and customers, and therefore gain some benefits of them understanding that you want to work in their best interests. Now, this graphic is a model that I won't be describing in full, but I highly recommend you look up the Electronic Tax Administration Advisory Commission's model on the taxpayer trust model. When you think about elements of trust, it's easy to see how privacy fits in there. When you think about, and we'll get to the rights, personal rights and consumer rights associated with privacy, they're not too much different from what we see in the pillars of trust. The idea that consumers should have choice, that we should be providing access, that there needs to be transparency and information, and then of course the ever-present security. In fact, I'm at my core a cybersecurity professional, but in some ways I think that cybersecurity becomes the focus of the areas and interests around trust, and sometimes to the detriment of really helping folks understand what's going on with a trust relationship. I think at this stage, we'd like to push out our first survey question and ask you all to go ahead and respond. Gail, can you help me with that?
Yes, certainly. We're ready for our first poll. This will be the first of 4 survey questions. And the question is, what is your professional designation? And you should see that pop up on your screen. Your choices are CPA, EA, tax attorney, or other. And this actually only lets you pick one. So even if you're all three of the above or two of the above, just go with one. And that's all we need for our acknowledgement that you're here in the session. And then click submit after you make your choice. Also, if you can't answer the question on your screen for some reason, go ahead and post your answer in the Ask a Question box, and we will record it there. Okay, and it looks like answers are coming in overwhelmingly for CPA. We'll share those results with you in just a second. There it goes. All right, 82.5% CPA.
Excellent. And this also satisfies my interest here. It looks like there's two of you that are going to give me trouble as tax attorneys. For some reason, I'm supposed to know, even though I'm not an attorney, I'm supposed to know to tell you folks that I am not an attorney and this is not legal advice, or at least it seems like I'm supposed to do that. We do have a few folks out there, and of course, I'm trying to be a little amusing about this, but really the truth of the matter is when we start looking at privacy and our obligations, once we get past the idea of our ethical obligations and fiduciary development of trust and the like, we get into regulatory requirements and interests. So, principle number one here is do what you think is the right thing by your clients and customers and consumers, and everything will be all right. Do I sound like a little bit too hunky-dory? That sounds to me like I grew up in a bubble, and I think everyone lives in that bubble with me. But I do like to start there, honestly. It's like, let's all do the right thing. I'm a big believer in promoting, to my children that most folks want to do the right thing. The challenge is when the definition of the right thing comes to mind, it can mean a number of different things to a number of folks. And that's why we have regulations, of course. We'll talk a little bit about three different regulations in the privacy world and try to play out the requirements. We are not giving any legal advice, of course. And I will tell you that this landscape is ever evolving. You might have heard of GDPR, the European Union's privacy regulation, really kind of took over the entire privacy world in terms of conceptually what the rights were and what the expectations were, and actually have teeth to the regulation, applying it and fining people if they don't comply, and a real strong structure around managing privacy. Even before that, we had in the U.S. Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which talks about privacy, and certainly the FTC gets involved nowadays, which we'll talk about their safeguards. And I want to keep as a placeholder your state with a little bit of a reference to the California Consumer Privacy Act, which many folks would think of as like GDPR light in some ways, or maybe GDPR, it's probably unfair to say GDPR light. It could be GDPR revised and applied to the American consumer and expectations around that, and help folks work through some of the regulations out there. So first and foremost is Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which was enacted in 1999 and requires financial institutions to protect consumer data. That's basically all it says. And we're done, right? Once again, we're stuck with this level of ambiguity, and we continue to peel that onion and go deeper and deeper into what it actually means as we get smarter about the nature and types of violations that are out there, the sensitivity level of individuals, the use. If you think about the explosion of social media, if many of you may be, like me, I remember the days actually pre-internet, and so social media came on strong. And let's say the late aughts and the early 10s, 2010 or so. And the level of privacy and the level of concern around that has significantly grown ever since then. Of course, the strange thing about this is that more and more people are more and more willing to share more and more sensitive information. How does that work? How do we make sense of that willingness to understand that? I mean, I remember when an internet search engine, I think it was Yahoo at the time, released a whole bunch of anonymized information, and if you worked hard, you could trace that information back to an individual user. The news outlets actually did that and found a user, and the person was essentially saying, "Oh, I can't believe they did that," and then they went on to express all the private information about them in a public manner, because they had the choice to offer that up within the scope of the conversation and the interview that was occurring. So you have this notion of information that is not always going to be sensitive to many folks, and it's given out readily, but there's got to be something more to it, because we know when we feel violated and we know when there's a challenge. So Gramm Leach Bliley came out to protect consumer data, and the IRS has been designated, the FTC designated the taxpayer return information as falling under Gramm Leach Bliley, because the taxpayer ecosystem, all you tax preparers and CPAs are considered financial institution, regardless of size. So the FTC takes over the responsibility for managing the GLBA's implementation throughout the IRS world. And the IRS has its own watchdogs and folks that are trying to pay attention to this as well. But really, it's the FTC and its safeguards rule that outlines the data safety measures that we're typically involved with or paying attention to when we try to deal with and understand privacy. I want to get to talking a little bit about privacy rights. And again, this is some sensitive information as we work through some of the details. I pulled out from the CCPA the rights that were most explicit in the California Consumer Privacy Act, and what the expectations were around those rights. And give me 1 second. So we have so I say courtesy of the CCPA. Why do I care so much about the CCPA? I don't know how many of you are from California. I bet there's a decent amount, just playing the odds, and you need to care. How many of you have California clients? You need to care. What about the rest of us? You still need to care. And the reason is we're all learning from each other. Every state is learning from a regulatory perspective from the regulations that have gone by. I mentioned that CCPA has taken essentially GDPR, which, by the way, took arguably PIPEDA, which was Canada's privacy regulation, even preceding Gramm Leach Bliley, and built on that to get an understanding of the nature and types of regulations out there. So when we think about this privacy, it's not just confidentiality or the protection of information from everyone, in our environment. It is the right to know. So the consumer has a right to know about what information you're capturing about him or her, and how you're intending to capture that information. It's the right to delete, but not only the right to delete, the right to correct and the right to change information about you that you believe is incorrect. You may remember in the early years, I want to say it was probably 10 years ago now, probably about 10 years or so ago, when the European Union came out with what they called the right to be forgotten on the internet, which sounds great. Someone doesn't want to have their information out on the internet, and therefore all the search engines and all the entities involved with collecting that information needs to eliminate that information from their environments. Does that really make folks forget about that? It's not clear. And certainly the sensitive information associated with things like, well, what if they are offenders of some rule or regulation, and folks have a right to know about them, and what type of information should be publicly available, and how can we continue that information? A large chunk of the folks that wanted to be forgotten usually wanted to be forgotten for some nefarious activities that were either associated with them or they were convicted of in their environment. So the right to delete involves there. The right to opt out is huge. The difference between opt in and opt out, if you ask behavioral economists, is like night and day. You may know right now, as you select your 401k plans in your environment, it's very common now to have as the default option to take money out for your 401k. That is, use your. Wait a minute. I can't believe I'm talking to CPAs and I'm not one. So you all know this, but the point of this is when you remove when you make the default option, the 4% that you want to have taken out, or whatever the number might be, folks are more likely to live with whatever information has already been, whatever selection has already been made. Right, it's the bias associated with maintaining the status quo, whatever you have. So opting in versus opting out, when you have to take an overt action to opt in versus opt out of something, people are more likely to just relax and accept whatever option you have available to them. It's a personal pet peeve of mine, and maybe it is of yours as well. As we get through the behavioral requirements here, it's important to help folks understand that they can say no to any kind of tracking, any kind of activity that's going on in their environment. And then the right to non-discrimination, that gets even more deep into the legal area. And the one area that I want to point out here is not only discrimination about race and sex and the traditional areas of the humans that we're thinking about with discrimination, but this is where we sort of entertain and enter into the use and interests of AI in making decisions and evaluating decisions, and this question of whether you have a human involved in the decision-making process or not. It really becomes an important point. Honestly, I think this area, typically the regulation says that there must be a human involved. Certainly GDPR has that requirement. But as we move forward, it's not clear to me that has been rationalized and justified. Perhaps it should be. And this, of course, AI hit the world by storm in 2023, and we're all excited about the prospects. We are, right? Maybe we aren't, and unnerved by it. So we'll be working through this. This is an area where I really highly recommend you continue to build your understanding of what's going on in the AI world as it relates to privacy, because we're not done there by a long shot. So let's talk about affirmative express consent. Getting back to the opt-in and opt-out opportunity here. The FTC is really working hard and pushing hard on what they call, their definition is of affirmative express consent. And that is this freely given specific consent to perform the activities that you are clearly and conspicuously disclosing to them in the following 5 areas. So you can see on your screen the areas you have to lay out, the categories of information, the purpose of what you have going on, any kind of third parties that are being involved, an easy means for consumers to withdraw consent, and then limitations on their ability to by law. Most privacy regulations have opportunities for folks, for example, for like law enforcement and any kind of other regulatory requirements where you maintain a database of information, and you have to pay attention to that and really be smarter about this. And so we know from actually the BetterHelp situation with the FTC, the final order, what the expectations are going to be for those of us in the tax preparing world, and you folks, the 86% of you folks who are CPAs in your environment. We're going to need to really pay attention to that, to affirmative express consent. It can be, if you have a strong online presence and are interacting quite a bit with your customers, of course, that's where this matters the most. And we're still hashing out what that actually means. And again, it's the I know it when I see it kind of environment, and we'll have to be smarter about that as we move forward. Now, throughout this, I defined consumer privacy on the first slide in a very kind of generic way, and I'm going to define taxpayer information based on what the IRS says is return information. This is taxpayer return information. So it's interesting here how we are broader and yet still specific when associating tax return information to the non-public personal information that is referred to in GLBA. We have to get more specific to understand things. And as you read through this list, I just want to point out the one item here, which is really item number 4, which I find very intriguing from a tax professional standpoint. And when looking at privacy regulations across the board, in a general sense, we're looking at PII, which is personally identifiable information, and PHI, health information, in their broadest sense, but almost always have specifics associated with that identifiable part. And that option number 4 is an interesting one because it is it incorporates information that is collected by the IRS about tax affairs, even if that PII or that identifiable information is deleted. A significant challenge in my estimation, and I suspect you all believe, because this idea of anonymized information and the like is really it's time tested in lots of areas, including the healthcare world and the like, where you could talk about certain cases and the like. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not saying this type of situation is or isn't legally allowed. What I would suggest is it's one of the items where it's going to be worth thinking about the way you interact with folks, the way you interact with your colleagues at conferences and the like, and the nature and types of things that could be shared or not shared. So be thinking about getting legal opinions associated with that. Hopefully you already read the really kind of, excuse me, the standard stuff associated with the personal information, but then also what the IRS has said is for you, said about you, or any of your financial data that you're providing as a set of the information being provided, the taxpayer information itself. And so we keep going around and around on these definitions. Even this is not specific enough at times, because the question of combinations of information, so bullet 3 says the name, address, and identifying number. In a general sense, we say, yeah, those are all PII, but are they all individually PII, or do they have to go in combination? In this case, they typically are all individually PII, but there are other situations like that in privacy regs where you really got to be careful about how that lays itself out. I think we are now time for our second survey, and would like to pass the baton to Gail to help us with the second survey, please.
Okay, we are ready for our second question. And this is, how comfortable do you currently feel in the knowledge of your responsibilities around protecting your client's data on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all comfortable and 5 being completely comfortable? So go ahead and pick your answer there and then click submit. And we will share results with you in a few seconds or shortly, but let me also, while we're waiting, remind you that if you are expecting to receive IRS CE credit for this event, you need to enter your PTIN number in the Ask a Question box on your screen. And also, a lot of people have asked about the slides, whether or not they're going to be available for download. They're not available for download, but the webinar will be archived on CPA Practice Advisor's site. I think it'll show up either later today or by tomorrow. So that's at cpapracticeadvisor.com/webinars. You'll be able to replay it there if you want to take pictures of any of the slides that are in the session. And you can see our results now. We're looking at 37% are saying 3 right in the middle. 41% are saying number 4, that they're pretty close to being completely comfortable. So it's a good mix. And after you look at those results, you can click that blue X box and that takes you back to the slides. So what do you think of these results, Pete?
I'm always intrigued by results like this. I guess I'm the older I get, the less I know kind of person, where I'm constantly learning and understanding how responsibilities change and vary. And while it's comforting to know that our audience is more confident than I am, and may need to express that level of confidence to their own clients and customers, it's always worth it to me to step back and try to take a second look at anything that you're working on. And certainly I'm interested in that the follow-up question, which would be, how well do you protect your client's data on a scale of 1 to 5? And that's an area that we see with our customers and clients. We are constantly trying to advise folks and help folks with more insight into ways to protect themselves. We have lots and lots of data in the cybersecurity space that would suggest that the nature and types of security controls are not always implemented as strongly as we would like. In fact, I have a small example of that from an organization you might know of a little bit later on in our presentation. So I'm glad to hear that you are confident in your responsibilities, and I would ask you to continue with that confidence and continue updating, update, because these things are going to be changing over time, and there will be little things that could catch you if you're not careful. So how do we think about the laws and how they affect you as CPA and custodians of your clients' personal information with a fiduciary responsibility to them? Really, it revolves around the ways and types of data collection that you're performing. That's in my mind probably, item 1 and item 3 on this list are the most different. We talk a lot in my space in the cybersecurity world on how privacy is similar and different to each other and what the differences are. So prior to privacy really becoming important in let's say the past decade, probably a little bit longer than that, no cybersecurity professional was asked to manage and understand consent in terms of collecting information on a website or anything like that. And so the opportunities you have and the ways that you perform your client data collection matter a lot to your environment. Of course, we do focus a lot on the data storage and the nature and types of sharing that come into play, and looking for ways to protect client-side data. And then the rights and requests as well, having an entire group that interacts with folks making the DSAR requests, the user access requests, and collecting information, wanting to know what information you as the provider is collecting on them can be quite the challenge. And then finally, this overall bucket of ensuring that we protect the information in our environment. So how are we going to do that anyway? Let's talk a little bit more. So the FTC has been given the rein to really govern GLBA for all financial institution privacy-related concerns. And hint, hint, that might be worth remembering for some reason. And so the FTC has laid out its safeguards rule in the environment. And this is where we get into some really interesting aspects of what's going on in our world today, post-COVID. What are the nature and types of work environments that we have to work with and controls that we want to put into place? The FTC basically has three big categories, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into the second one as we move forward here in our environment. So we'll be thinking about physical safeguards, technical safeguards, and administrative safeguards. What do we mean? For the most part, these are self-explanatory, but I find the physical one actually the most interesting because, back in the day, and maybe even in today, for many of you folks, you have an office environment, and maybe you have workers working with you, or you have an enclosed area and kind of typical traditional office types of security, and you protect all the paper being printed out and all your printers and everything like that. You also might be backing up your systems in old school ways. We would go tape to backup and had elaborate schemes, grandfather, father, son types of schemes for backing up systems and taking systems off site, usually for disaster recovery. But nowadays, more and more, it's protecting data and helping folks there. So what's happened post-COVID? Not going to be a shock. I wouldn't be surprised if 75% of you are connecting with us today from a home office, whether you're an independent worker or working for a larger company. It's very common these days. And the question is, as you look around your office, is your client data protected? So the nature and notion of, well, I'm in my own house and that is protection is fine. But generally speaking, not always true. The physical security is a little more lax or fluid, at least in the human consumer environment, right? As individuals in our home areas, can't think of the word right now. But in the office world, we're very concerned about much more attention to detail and structured approaches to things. We have many more audits and the like. If an auditor were to say, I want to randomly visit 10 of your employees' homes and verify the physical controls, what level of confidence would you have there that they are dealing with things? Conversely, the second element to this is the backup, the backup tapes. The backups generally now, more often than not, are not being performed on physical tapes anymore. You're not backing up on your physical tape, are you? No, please say no. Let's not do that and find other ways to back up. And it's not entirely true. We typically will have multiple backups. You back up for archiving, you back up for safety and protection. Oftentimes you'll back up in the cloud, even if you're in the cloud, and create that secondary resource of information to protect against any kind of physical damage that might occur. I like this slide because this is one of our kind of standard slides that we provide, and I think of 30 years boiling down to technical safeguards include updating your anti-malware and antivirus software on Office devices. And I think to myself, oh boy, it gets much broader than that. It's really hard since we're dealing with, offices of 1 and 5 people. It comes down to that, but it comes down to that because so many other controls are built into your systems, and you have to enable them. You have to ensure that they're providing, firewalls being the most obvious one here. and we'll talk about some of the other requirements and capabilities as you become a bigger and bigger company, the level of complexity increases and aligns with the size of the company. You have more expectation to protect yourself in some of the more advanced ways that we have, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes here. And then we have administrative safeguards, documentation. Many of you, I think I even saw some questions on the WISP. This is not focused on the written information security policy. I always find that intriguing because there are certainly folks that have strong security and don't have a very high quality WISP associated with them, and then vice versa, a high quality WISP, but they just never get around to evaluating it. In fact, it's one of the things that I find challenging here on the administrative side is how are we continuing to maintain our documentation about protecting our environment and then ultimately protecting our environment. So are we performing various things like evaluating our employees and testing them to ensure that they're not going to click on the link? Do you think they're going to click on the link? Yes, they are going to click on the link. 4% of the time they're going to click on the link. If you don't believe me, go ahead and check Scientia's data, CYENTIA. Scientia has published some data on phishing, and it's not actually that simple as like a 4%, but there's a progression of people that will click on links based on the quality of the phishing email, and there are many folks that will never click at all. There are a chunk of folks that will click once, but then pretty much not again. And then there's folks that are going to click twice, and then there's people that will just always click. And so I'm always a little wary of this area because we should know this already. You should already know that it's likely that it's possible that someone will be clicking on your link, and we have better and better technical safeguards to protect against it. We can detonate off-site, or in a safe environment. We can look for ways to protect our operating environment separately from a more general use environment. We could employ lots of different controls to protect ourselves. So I hope you do that as well. Now I want to dive in a little bit deeper into the cybersecurity framework, and I thought it would be fun to take over some work that was done by, excuse me, pardon me, one second. Had to get that frog out of my throat. I want to talk about the NIST cybersecurity framework. The NIST, if you don't know about NIST, they are the National Institute for Standards and Telecommunication. Please don't write in and say I got the acronym wrong. We only ever say NIST except in forums like this. So the NIST cybersecurity framework, NIST CSF, is a child of NIST SP 800-53, which is probably the most prominent cybersecurity framework, certainly in the United States. Especially for mid-sized companies and lower. The only other candidate is ISO. If you folks are international, you might use the ISO 27001, 27002 types of security standards. But honestly, they're all saying very similar things here. And here's where we go through. There's 5 stages of the NIST cybersecurity framework. I've given entire 3-day long training sessions on the NIST cybersecurity framework. So we're not going to go fast here, but you should. Do you have 3 days? Here we go, folks. Just kidding. When we look at the 5 stages, I want to look underneath in each column, some areas of focus that have been called out by the Inspector General of the United States. When they look at government entities, these are the areas they're looking at much more closely through a program called FISMA. If you're not familiar with FISMA, you should look it up. It's reporting metrics that every department, including the IRS, including the FTC, including folks that are managing our environment or that are responsible for auditing and verifying the protection of the environment. I think my takeaway from looking at those stats through the years is this stuff is hard for everyone. And it's not necessarily about the destination as much as it is about the journey for privacy and in this case, the cybersecurity. So NIST CSF has 5 different areas. The first is to identify. It is amazing how difficult it can be to actually just take a step back and look at your environment and try to get an understanding of what assets you have in play, how you're connecting to various assets, and what you need to do in order to understand the resources that you have available to you. Second is protect. This area in and of itself is like the vast majority of what cybersecurity folks do day in and day out. If they're in, your SecOps group or your security event management group and the like, which is employing the technical safeguards that matter most for protecting critical services. The call outs here by the Inspector General this year, configurations, hardening your configurations, doing a better job with identity management, then looking at data security and security training. This is very interesting to me because the host and the network environment was really the area that we spent a lot of time on in our early years providing security. And nowadays, everything has moved up the stack because the layers below us are getting more ephemeral and more arbitrary in a way as we develop out virtual systems and allow folks to connect more and more data and resources to multiple places. Then the protection has to exist around the blobs of data themselves, the user accounts themselves, and the like in their area. The third is detect, which is all about looking, always monitoring, always trying to find and understand the nature of attacks and looking for information. So we're implementing activities to do the monitoring. It can be a dog. I got to tell you, it is hard to really collect boatloads of information and sift through it at real-time speed and identify the attacks. But that's what it takes. Microsoft these days, over the last decade or so, has been publishing the nature and types of security signals that it's been looking at through the years. And the last number I saw was that they were looking at 65 trillion security signals every fill in the blank. What do you think the frequency is? 65 trillion security signals every day. Every day, Microsoft was looking at that. Now, they have millions of customers, and so it starts to play itself out. But when you start thinking about the nature of intractable problems, you look at ways to manage this complexity that really need to be kind of evaluated as you move forward. And I would consider Microsoft to be top tier, really all the platform providers that you're used to, Microsoft, Google, AWS, those types of folks to really have the best of the best when it comes to cybersecurity professionals in lots of ways. The fourth area is to respond. That is, how are you going to triage any kind of inappropriate activity that's occurring? And finally, we have recover. How are we going to do a better job of learning from our any kind of experience that we might have and getting smarter about it? So here's how we do that. Like, we build out our maturity levels. Once again, the IG has its own markers for evaluating the levels of maturity you have throughout. I'm not going to belabor this too much because you are unlikely to be evaluated on these particular maturity levels, but it's worth being aware that every auditor has either explicit maturity guidance like this, or it's implicit in the way they think about the audits that they're performing. You may actually have this yourself as you go out and audit folks or provide attestations or SOC 2s and the like, and throughout your environment. So really, we're getting more formal as we move up the chain. We're usually getting more quantitative. We are getting more consistent throughout. But I got to tell you, even if you reach level 5, it's not like you're done. all of this stuff changes all the time. Any growing organization is looking at new architectures all the time. It's harder and harder for me as I started out in the world of just getting turning from mainframes to client server computing, and now we're at serverless and microcomputing and the level of detail that we're dealing with, quantum computing and the like, and trying to get through this. So we always have to be continuing to protect ourselves there. And I believe we are now at our survey number 3. So Gail, please take it away.
Thank you. So this is our third polling question. How comfortable do you currently feel in the knowledge? Oops, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Back that up. What resource do you turn to for information about your data protection responsibilities? And your options are presentations like this one, association publications, IRS publications, or other. So go ahead and check the one that you feel is closest to your own situation and then click submit. Again, if you are having trouble entering your answer online, you can enter your answer in the Ask a Question box and we'll pick it up there. Let's see. Oh, and also before the end of the session, I'll send out that link again. People have been asking about the WISP document that tax preparers are expected to have and in fact need in order to renew their PTIN. So I'll send a link to that document again before we finish up today. And it looks like results are coming in now, and we've got the 2 winners are people are either turning to presentations like this or to IRS publications as their main sources for getting information about data protection responsibilities.
And here's where the contrarian in me comes out, folks. So, my wife hates this about me because, we're all hunky-dory, and I can say thank you very much. I'm excited that you turn to presentations like this to learn about security, but don't do that. Don't do that. Here's the thing, folks. I mean, you don't have to become a cybersecurity professional, but you should be looking for much more specific guidance on what it takes to provide to employ security and provide best practices there. So, like I said, I certainly appreciate being a part of a collection of webinars, and I know we've given other webinars, and CPA Advisor does a great job with their webinar series here. But you really, honestly, and truly need to do 2 things. Number 1 is read the source documents themselves when it comes to the regulations, the regulatory requirements. Make sure that you read that stuff. A lot of times you have to read the supporting information as well, because this develops over time. Many of you might be required to provide some sort of attestation associated with PCI, the most prescriptive regulation out there, and it's not even government driven. And so it's worth remembering that. And so please, so that's number 1. Number 2 is go look up NIST cybersecurity framework and on the NIST site and pull that out and look at the recommendations that they're making there, and look for local professionals to help you if you're not comfortable providing the security yourself. So let's talk about then.
Hop in here one quick time. Be sure to click the little blue X box in your survey results screen if you haven't done so already, so you can get back to our slides. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. We are actually in wrap-up mode, and I think it's important for you to understand your responsibility. I just mentioned this, don't rely on this information, but in the same way that I rely on you for CPA for accounting advice, you should rely on cybersecurity pros for cyber advice. We joke around about wanting to talk like the business. Some of you may be at organizations where it feels like you're talking about cybersecurity all the time, and I think that's a little bit destructive because we are here. The cyber world is here to protect you and let you go about sometimes clicking links when it makes sense and being rational and responsible there. And it's up to you to really take that and run with it as well. in your environment. Data storage and handling is the crucial element here. When you start thinking about the nature and types of data, the taxpayer return information, that's the core element to all of this. I already mentioned it, that data can be ephemeral. It can move around to lots of places. It can get replicated. It can get downloaded. Look for ways to have the security travel with it. That almost always means, we're a little early here, but encrypting the data and some form of rights management. It's not a common control, but something that will behoove you over time to really provide protection there. The one control, by the way, that cybersecurity professionals, I believe, all agree is probably the single control that reduces the most risk, not all the risk by any stretch, but the most risk in today's world. Can you guess what it is? Write it down to yourself, and here it comes. MFA, multi-factor authentication. Most folks agree that it's not always going to be true, but certainly it solves a lot of problems. So if you have resistance or are resistant yourself, it addresses a lot of the concerns associated with the reason the attack paths that are following the paths that they do is because people don't employ multi-factor authentication better. And so look to adapt to special situations and best practices in your world. Lastly, I want to return to our taxpayer trust model, lest we forget, we want to ensure that we're managing our customers and clients' privacies, because it's not only is it our duty, but it's worth our while. It's worth our while to do a better job of developing digital trust. I've given boatloads of presentation on digital trust because it's fascinating to me the way people think about trust in the physical world, in the human person-to-person world, is very different from the way they think about trust in all these nameless, faceless organizations. Have you ever tried to, call customer support for some of the major platforms out there? There's no human involvement whatsoever. So we have to well, you can't really replace it, but we have to augment that with the controls and the confidence that folks need to be able to continue to develop out their online presence in their environment. And I think, let's see. So I really appreciate your time today, and thank you very much. As we move to Q&A, I think we have time for one last survey question. Yeah.
Yes, we have a final question, which is a true and false question. True or false, the FTC is responsible for implementing the U.S. law that requires financial institutions to protect consumer data. So test your knowledge with that one. Go ahead and enter your answer and click submit. And while we're doing that, we do have just time for a couple quick questions. One is, is there a particular backup method that you recommend, Pete?
Well, I would be looking to whoever your provider is. Look for backup in the cloud. Get local recommendations. My experience has been there are so many different types of architectures and the like that it's hard to really nail one down. But you're looking for a backup that can remain online. You're also looking for immutable backups. So really do a search on the word immutable. That should get you there, because now this is the challenge, because that's not explicitly for privacy's sake, but certainly will protect you against ransomware types of engagements. You want to back up your data really to address ransomware. So look for the word immutable backups and work with that and work from there.
Okay, and it looks like 80% of our attendees have said that the FTC, true, is responsible for implementing the law that requires financial institutions to protect consumer data.
Yes, it is. And there are many other organizations that have many other types of responsibility around privacy. So don't blink. There can be things coming down the road, and the FTC has been pretty tricky in some ways with the way they lay things out. But the safeguards rule is an easy, a good start there, and it's worth getting an understanding of the way they are thinking about cybersecurity. And my hint there is NIST CSF, NIST Cybersecurity Framework, over and over. Are there more questions, Gail?
There are a few more questions. I may have to send them to you to answer by email because I have a couple things I want to make sure to wrap up with. And we're at the top of the hour. So first of all, I'm posting the link again on your screen for the article about creating your own WISP plan, WISP document. So feel free to take a copy of that link and go ahead and check out that article. Also, I want to mention, first of all, that we are so grateful to Drake Software for providing us with Pete for an hour and with all of this useful information, and with the ability to offer everyone a free credit, a CPE credit or CE credit. If you haven't posted your PTIN number yet and need to do so, you can do so on the screen in the question and answer box. We want to thank everyone for coming today. And also, I'd like to remind you that if other people are watching this with you on the same screen, you can send me their email address and we'll get credits out to them. I am G. Perry, GPERRY, at CPAPracticeAdvisor.com. And also, if you have any issues regarding CPE or anything else you want to share, or if you don't have your PTIN number with you now and want to email it to me, again, it's G. Perry, GPERRY, at CPAPracticeAdvisor.com. After we're finished here, you will see an after-event survey come up on your screen where we just ask you if you think we did a decent job, and if you have any comments that you can share that will help make our webinar programs better, we would appreciate that. And I think that's it. I think unless you have any parting comments, Pete, I think we're ready to finish up.
Thank you very much for hosting, Gail. I appreciate it, and good luck, folks. This is tricky stuff. I hope you stay apprised and informed, and always feel free to reach out if you have thoughts or ideas. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all so much. Our audio will end now.